The Prime Minister, however, was not. They spent the day in Parliament attempting to meet with members of the government. They were not given an opportunity to sit down and speak and share their stories with members of the government's front bench. They were not able to hand over the letters that they had collected from concerned Australians that had been collected and requested to be handed to the Prime Minister, and I have them here with me today. Because these proud, courageous and compassionate Australians deserve to be heard, Mr Acting Deputy President. And I'm going to read out some of the excerpts from their letters in this chamber because I think it's important. They were letters that were written to our Prime Minister, and they show an important record that there are many Australians who care deeply about refugees in this time of unprecedented government cruelty. I wanted to start with a letter from a teacher at the Mary MacKillop College in Nunabar, named Mary. She writes, "I write on behalf of the students," Mary says, "to plead to your sense of compassion and care for the most vulnerable in our world. Surely your heart is touched by the images of those who have fled terror and persecution, have had to flee without loved ones. As Australians, we are ashamed that we cannot give from what we have. We cannot open our doors with a welcome, and that we are not providing the care that prevents emotional, mental and physical distress. We pray daily that those in leadership positions in our country will have the courage to lead with compassion and a sense of justice and equality. We try to live by the message of Mary MacKillop and Jesus. You know that message. We plead with you to bring it to life." Another woman from Queensland wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, and she said that she expected more from her government. She writes, "The secrecy worries me and makes me wonder why there is not openness. I've heard harrowing stories of conditions in detention centres, and I request, as a matter of urgency, the conditions under which the detained people have to live are improved to a standard that would be acceptable to the Australian community as a whole. I was a boat person," she writes, "arriving in 1954 at the age of 7 with my family from England, and I am also a proud Australian citizen." Anne Hilton, who has previously worked inside Australia's detention centres and who worked tirelessly to organise the walk, also wrote to the Prime Minister. And she says in her letter, "No government has the right to inflict deliberate harm and suffering on any asylum seeker, but this is what you are doing. This is the example and the leadership that you are imposing on my children and my grandchildren. You are showing that cruelty, bullying and injustice prevail over kindness, care and generosity. You are showing them how to divide a nation and how to instill prejudice, hate and fear. This is not the Australia that I desire for my grandchildren. They do not deserve to inherit the consequences of your wrong and immoral actions towards asylum seekers. Your policies are leaving a disturbing legacy. My heartfelt plea, my serious demand as an Australian citizen is simple. Stop the cruelty, stop the harm and suffering. Australia will never be a great country while we continue to leave the burden of dark legacies of suffering for future generations to carry." And Anne from South Australia also wrote to the Prime Minister, and she says in her letter, "Prime Minister, you have the power, skills and knowledge to lead all Australians in changing their attitude and beliefs about people seeking asylum in Australia. You have the power, skills and knowledge to lead Australians in our understanding of and our respect for human rights. I expect more, and I expect you to end the policy of indefinite detention of people who have not been charged with or found guilty of committing any crime. I look forward to hearing from you soon." She completes her letter. Some people decided to keep their letters short, Mr Acting Deputy President. Michael, from here in the ACT, simply wrote, "Dear Mr Abbott, Your despair factories on Manus and Nauru shame Australia. Well said, Michael. Couldn't agree more. There is one more letter I want to share with the chamber today. It's from Jennifer. Jennifer is a young woman who met the Walkers when they arrived here in Canberra, and her letter reads, "Yesterday I stood in a crowd and was introduced to the silent Walkers. I felt both pride that people could commit in this way and shame that it was necessary. These Australians, Mr Acting Deputy President, have spoken up because they know that when it comes to cruelty towards other people, particularly those who are significantly vulnerable, like refugees, this government has gone too far. Many Australians are saying, 'Not in my name, Mr Abbott, not in my name.' And to that point, I'd like to table the letters that have been collected along the way of that walk and to urge the Prime Minister to read these letters, to consider the words of concerned Australians. And as I stand here today with the pleas of open-hearted, caring Australians wanting a better way, I also reflect on the fact that there is a young man currently lying brain dead in a hospital in Brisbane, an asylum seeker who contracted an infection while being in immigration detention on Manus Island, was not given the medical help that he needed, the medical care that was necessary in any timely manner. He now lies brain dead on a hospital bed in the Brisbane hospital. And I understand that as I stand here today, his family back in Tehran are having to make an awful decision about when that machine will be switched off. He will never recover, that young man. He came to Australia seeking our help and our protection and our care, and our government, has failed him. This will now be the second person who has died at the hands of this cruel policy after being detained in the Manus Island Detention Centre. It is time that these factories of despair, as Michael from the ACT wrote in his letter, are closed. It is time for a rethink of how we manage the humanitarian needs of those who are so desperate that they sell everything to board a leaky boat to get to Australia. Let's give people a safer option. Let's not put people in harm's way. Let's not do further harm to them once they have arrived. Increase the humanitarian intake, as Senator O'Sullivan, I heard the other day, was even advocating in his own party for. Increase the humanitarian intake so we can offer people safer places and safer ways to reach Australia. Let the children out of immigration detention so we can stop damaging and hurting them every single day. Every day that a child is left in the immigration prison is another day that they are hurt and damaged. Give hope to the people who we have stripped all decency from. Give people a sense of purpose. Understand that the only crime many of these people have ever committed is the desire for freedom for their families and safety for themselves. It is not illegal, Mr Acting Deputy President, to arrive in Australia and ask to be assessed as a refugee. Doesn't matter how many times Mr Morrison, as our Immigration Minister, wishes to use the words illegal, people in immigration prisons have done nothing wrong. They are not illegal. They are not boat people. They are people who deserve proper care, proper protection, and a little more decency and compassion. Thank God there are compassionate Australians out there willing not just to walk in silence, but to put pen to paper and urge better of our Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy.